You're watching a Voyagers exclusive.
The Berlin Wall was a separation of the world's two superpowers, the divide between the capitalist West and the communist East. It was both an extension of the Iron Curtain and a method of containing the only capitalist haven in an almost all communist East Germany. Here in the heart of East Germany, Berlin was trapped, and so were its people. Here, a wall was created to block out the tumor that was West Berlin. But this wall brought out the heroes, the ones who hated the wall and everything it stood for, acting against it, sneaking past its borders or actively working to destroy it. Reagan, the then President of the United States, stood there in front of a crowd of Berliners, his voice echoing across the walled-in city. The wall symbolized all that Reagan has sought to stop, and so he initiated the first step towards a unified, capitalistic world was overcoming the Berlin Wall.
Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
During 1987, in the midst of great controversy within Germany, President Ronald Reagan comes to the Brandenburg Gate in West Berlin in order to articulate to the leaders and citizens of West Germany a plea to end the conflict between both West and East Germany. His main priority is to rally the people of West Berlin to recognize the inevitable spread of Western democracy and to oppose the Berlin Wall, which had endured 25 years of use. Reagan, the President of the United States at the time, toted a great deal of weight with his words and was able to utilize both logic and moral appeals to the Germans in order to conceive a convincing and concise argument.
Firstly, Reagan, President of the United States, carried a large amount of ethos by just his title. His words are respected because of his position, but also because of his history as a compelling communicator and both a politician and an actor. To put the situation in perspective and to get a sense of his popularity, Reagan had just successfully won his second term in 1984 by a preposterous margin. As a result of this, Reagan is able to hold a great deal of credibility in his words and as a result appear convincing.
The content-based ethos within the speech hailed from the multitude of credible examples and facts. Additionally, the fact that many alternative viewpoints are offered illustrate Reagan's desire to persuade the audience into thinking they have free thought, yet the best choice is Reagan. Reagan addresses contending leaders of different countries when he says, in the 1950s, Khrushchev predicted, "We will bury you." But in the West today, we see a free world that has achieved a level of prosperity and well-being unprecedented in all human history. In the communist world, we see failure, technological backwardness, declining standards of health, even want of the most basic kind, too little food. Designating multiple viewpoints allows the reader to express much thought on their own. Reagan goes on to delineate the motives of the Soviets and their supposed pre-reform actions. We hear much from Moscow about a new policy of reform and openness. Some political prisoners have been released. Certain foreign news broadcasts are no longer being jammed. Some economic enterprises have been permitted to operate with greater freedom from state control. In his inclusion of the communists, he's talking about other political influences at the time, which further strengthens his argument by including various frames of reference.
Within the speech, while the president is successful in acquiring credibility through the utilization of being rational, logos, and examples, he lacks statistics and specific measurements that could strengthen his case even further. As an example,
even today, the Soviet Union still cannot feed itself.
This is a general statement, and Reagan could have done a better job by setting facts about the poverty or starvation rate. Despite this, his presidency somehow makes up for his case. Reagan uses logos to supplement his claim that Western viewpoints such as freedom, democracy, and for the Berlin Wall to be destroyed are beneficial to their society. Reagan uses logic by discussing the sheer amount of countries that are prospering as a result of Western ideals. He particularly focuses on the potential economic growth, something that Eastern Germany is in dire need of.
Japan rose from ruin to become an economic giant. Italy, France, Belgium, virtually every nation in Western Europe saw political and economic rebirth. the European community was founded.
Listeners hear this, and by logic, believe that because a good economy is positive, doing something that causes such a thing is positive as well. Reagan then backs up his many claims with ulterior anecdotes. He finally talks about the source of such an economic waterfall in the U.S. In the West today, we see a free world that has achieved a level of prosperity and well-being unprecedented in all human history.
On top of Reagan's use of logic and ethics, the president evokes a great deal of pathos as well. Throughout the speech, Reagan's emotional and moral convictions complement his rhetoric. We're drawn here by the feeling of history in the city, more than 500 years older than our own nation. Here, Reagan pays homage to Berlin's rich and interesting history, and also creates a relationship between him and his viewer by humbling his home country. Reagan goes on to contextualize his thoughts to the viewer by using unique imagery.
Those barriers cut across Germany in a gash of barbed wire, concrete, dog runs, and guard towers. There remain armed guards and checkpoints.
Now that he has articulated a clear image of the context, Reagan tries to further correlate himself to the audience. He does this by describing an everyday German. Every man is a German, separated from his fellow man. Every man is a Berliner, forced to look upon a scar. Instead of being seen as an opposing leader of an enemy country, Reagan now appears to be someone fighting for the people. He demonstrates that he recognizes how Berliners feel. The adoption of empathy in his speech further elicits ethos and shows the Germans that he truly is one of them. One area that Reagan could have improved on with his speech is him displaying his respect for Soviet and German leaders. Reagan uses very risky speech at times, particularly when he challenges the Soviet General Secretary, Mikhail Gorbachev, to tear down this wall. This could have catalyzed the arms race that was occurring at the time, but luckily Gorbachev interpreted the speech as a plea for peace.
When delving into the syntax and diction of the Brandenburg speech, there's a heap of rhetorical techniques that can be erected. To preface the speech, the location of the Brandenburg Gate at the Berlin Wall sets a backdrop for what Reagan was trying to communicate. Context is a very significant part of a persuasive piece, as it directly relates to the audience.
In the first paragraph, Reagan further conceives context by describing previous presidential efforts to solve the situation. He said that 24 years ago, President John F. Kennedy visited Berlin, speaking to the people of the city and the world at the City Hall. This illustrates Reagan's confidence that he will finish the job this time around. Additionally, within the first paragraph, there is an impactful use of both pathos and ethos. Pathos is utilized when nostalgia of the Germans and Americans is mentioned. This directly connects Reagan to the audience, enhancing the persuasiveness of the speech in the process. For ethos, the reputation of JFK and his important visit brings credibility and seriousness to the situation.
In the second paragraph, Reagan attempts to win over the crowd through flattery of the Berliners.
But I must confess, we're drawn here by other things as well. By the feeling of history in the city, more than 500 years older than our own nation. By the beauty of Grunwald and the Tiergarten. Most of all, by your courage and determination.
This constructs familiarity and personal connection between the two. Reagan goes on to further complement the connection by speaking German, which shows the audience that he identifies with the German struggle.
Diction comes into play in the fourth paragraph, when Reagan attempts to articulate the abhorrent results of the Berlin Wall and the conflict between East and West Germans. Words such as brutal, totalitarian, impose, separation, cutting, restriction, and scar are all purposefully appropriated in order to evoke mistrust and opposition. Symbolism is also brought up in the fourth paragraph, when Reagan describes the gate in great detail. This gate symbolizes the Berlin Wall and Reagan's purpose to show the necessity for its termination.
Ethos and parallelism are utilized in paragraph 5 when Reagan establishes credibility. Reagan establishes credibility first by addressing his presidential position, and second by paralleling the world of Reagan and his audience, the Berliners. He does this by using specific diction, as you can hear here.
When President Kennedy spoke at the City Hall those 24 years ago, freedom was encircled. Berlin was under siege. And today, despite all the pressures upon this city, Berlin stands secure in its liberty, and freedom itself is transforming the globe.
Reagan introduces the Marshall Plan in paragraph 6, which gains Reagan the support of many more Berliners. Through quote and writing style, the Berliners are now aware that if and when the Berlin Wall falls, they will become economically stable once again as a result. Reagan ends the conversation about the Marshall Plan in paragraph 9, and then tries to bring levity to the situation by making a joke in German.
But, my friends, there were a few things the Soviets didn't count on. Berliner Hirsch, Berliner Humor, Ja und Berliner Schnauz.
In the 10th paragraph, Reagan is able to discredit the USSR's Khrushchev through the use of anaphora. Reagan does this when he repeats the word freedom in order to emphasize its significance.
Freedom leads to prosperity. Freedom replaces the ancient hatreds among the nations with comedy and peace. Freedom is the victor.
In the 11th paragraph, Reagan uses two rhetorical questions, which establishes antithesis within the speech.
In the 12th paragraph, apostrophe is appropriated when Reagan says here,
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Reagan has eliminated his nice guy facade in order to inspire the Berliners to join his side in taking down the Berlin Wall. He achieves this by directly targeting Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviets.
Von Weizsäcker has said the German question is open as long as the Brandenburg Gate is closed.
Also of note is the noticeably short paragraph which emphasizes and emboldens the message of the words.
Overall, Reagan is able to balance the use of a variety of rhetorical devices such as ethos, logos, and pathos in order to deliver a persuasive speech to the people of West Germany. Reagan's speech was electrifyingly significant and proved to be the major precipitate in having the Berlin Wall torn down and subsequently Germany to be reunited.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
Super clear.
Specific diction, such as long diction,
Bing, 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 and it's done. It's more taps.
I just took a step back because the water was hitting me. Is it still in focus?
You might need to do You're watching a Voyagers exclusive.
3, 2, 1.